I knew this woman was going to make trouble for me, but I didn't imagine it would be like this. Karen, the most arrogant neighbor in the condominium, decided it would be a good idea to sue me, claiming she was attacked by a swarm of bees in her own house. There's just one small detail. We discovered that, before she was attacked, she had stolen honey straight from my hives. Yes, you heard right. She came onto my land, got her hands on the honeycombs, and then came to play the victim. Now tell me, who in their right mind messes with bees and thinks they're going to get away with it? There are certain people in the world who seem to wake up every day thinking, how can I ruin someone's life today? And this woman, this unfortunate woman in my neighborhood, led this team with mastery. If there was an Olympics for annoying people, she would have won the gold medal. And she wasn't just the kind of annoying person who gets upset about anything. She took it as a life mission. I've lived in this condominium for years. I've always been quiet, looking after my hives, selling my honey, and living my life in peace. But of course, when an HOA decides to meddle in everything, there's always some creature that thinks it owns the world. And that's exactly what happened. She, this insufferable citizen, had been picking on me for ages. First, she complained that my garden wasn't up to the community's aesthetic standards. Then she filed a complaint because, according to her, my bees were threatening the residents. Yes, threatening. As if they had learned martial arts and were planning a coordinated attack on the neighbors. I laughed at such idiocy because, honestly, who in their right mind would believe such nonsense? But of course, there's always someone willing to go along with the nonsense. And then, one fine day, I received a notice. The woman was suing me, claiming that she had been attacked by a swarm of bees in her own home, that she had had an allergic reaction, and that I should pay not only her medical expenses, but also compensation for moral and emotional damages. And, as if that wasn't enough, she wanted me to remove my hives because, according to her, they weren't suitable for a residential environment. I almost fell over backwards. This lady had completely lost her mind. I knew she was annoying, but that was a level of insanity I wasn't prepared to deal with. I called my lawyer right away, still trying to process the size of the joke. "Dude, you're not going to believe this," I said, laughing nervously. He listened to the story and let out a heavy sigh, in the way that only someone used to dealing with people completely out of touch with reality does. "Does she have any proof?" he asked. And that's when I realized what had been bothering me all along. Nothing made sense. Firstly, how did she know they were my bees? Did they wear badges? Secondly, no other person in the neighborhood had complained of bee attacks. And thirdly, what on earth was she doing getting stung so many times that she needed medical attention? Something wasn't adding up. That's when I decided to investigate. Because if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that when something seems ridiculously absurd, there's usually a much worse truth hidden behind it. Little did I know that I was about to discover that this woman wasn't just annoying. She was a criminal. After receiving that ridiculous lawsuit, my mind was working nonstop. The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Bees aren't like dogs or cats. They don't go around attacking people at random. If that woman had really been stung so many times that she needed medical attention, something had happened. But what? That's when I decided to investigate. And as any sensible person would do, I started asking the neighbors. It didn't take much effort to realize that, despite the fact that she was the owner of morals and good manners in the condominium, no one there really liked the woman. Everyone had some story about her trying to butt in where she wasn't wanted, making absurd complaints to the HOA, or getting into trouble for completely imbecilic reasons. One of the neighbors, Mr. Thompson, a gentleman who had lived there for decades, called me over and spoke softly. "Son, I'm not one for gossip, but that woman, she's got a light hand." "What do you mean?" I asked, frowning. "Let's just say that some things in the neighborhood disappear when she passes by. Some garden ornaments, some tools. And recently, I heard a buzz about someone seeing her hanging around your property." That's when the red alert went off in my head. I've always been careful with my hives, and kept everything tightly closed, but at the back of the property, I had a small shed where I stored freshly harvested honeycombs before processing them. Was it possible that this woman had the audacity to break into my property and steal my honey? It seemed too surreal, but I needed proof. I decided to install a hidden camera near the hives and the shed. If this woman really was going where she didn't belong, I would have everything on record. And that's exactly what happened. The following night, while everyone was asleep, my camera captured the most bizarre spectacle I've ever seen. There she was, wearing a black coat and a ridiculous hat, trying to get into my shed. With a flashlight in her hand, she forced the lock, looking around as if she were in a bad spy movie. After a few clumsy attempts, she managed to open the door and, without hesitation, began to take honeycombs and stuff them into a cloth bag. Now, tell me, what kind of human being steals honey in the middle of the night? But the best was yet to come. Just as she turned around to leave, something flashed in the corner of the camera, a movement in the air. That's when I realized. The bees. Oh yes, they didn't like the unexpected visit one bit. I've never seen such a desperate person in my life. She tried to run, but the bees were everywhere, shaking her arms, tripping over her own feet, knocking over the jars of honey. She screamed non-stop, cursing everything and everyone. It was like watching a cartoon, but live. She managed to get off my land, but not before being stung countless times, and that's when it all made sense. That story about her being attacked by a swarm, it was true, but the detail she conveniently forgot to mention was that she herself had provoked the bees by breaking into my shed and stealing my honey. Now I had everything I needed: videos, proof, and a perfect explanation to expose her. And I swear, if you think that was satisfactory, just wait until you see what comes next. You know that moment when you realize you're holding the most powerful card in the game? Well, that's exactly how I felt when I watched the video of my neighbor being punished by the forces of nature. That woman, who thought she was the queen of the condominium, was there, struggling in the dark, covered in bees, stumbling around like a silly cockroach, after stealing my honey like a cartoon bear. The irony was so great that I almost felt sorry. Almost. Now, let's recap. She came onto my land in the middle of the night, stole my honey, got beaten up by the bees, and, the next day, decided to sue me as if I were the villain in the story. If that isn't the perfect definition of a prick, I honestly don't know what is. But I wasn't going to let it go. I took the videos and made an appointment with my lawyer. When I showed him the images, he opened his eyes wide, then started laughing so loudly that it took him a minute to pull himself together. Are you telling me that this woman came onto your land to steal your honey and then wanted to sue you because she was attacked by the bees she herself had annoyed? Exactly. My God. He took a deep breath, still holding in his laughter. That's the most absurd thing I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot. He assured me that, with this evidence, her case would turn to dust. In fact, I could fight back with a lawsuit for trespassing, theft, and even defamation, since she was trying to paint me as a negligent neighbor who let a mortal danger loose in the neighborhood. That's when I had an idea. Instead of simply taking the evidence to court and getting it over with, why not expose this woman in front of everyone? After all, she loved playing the superior, meddling in other people's lives, and trying to dictate rules to the neighborhood. There was nothing better than unmasking her on the very ground where she loved to parade her arrogance. And the perfect moment came when the HOA called an emergency meeting to discuss the dangers of bees and the risks to the community. Who had suggested the meeting? That's right, our beloved honey thief. I didn't even have to try very hard. On the day of the meeting, the community hall was packed. It was the kind of event where neighbors came more to gossip than to actually solve something. Karen was there, her face still swollen from the stings, talking with false concern about how we should all feel safe in our homes and that certain people were putting the community at risk. The truth is that I suffered an attack, she said, putting her hand to her chest as if she were a victim of war. An uncontrolled swarm invaded my backyard and almost put me in hospital. What if it had been a child? What if it had been an elderly person? This can't go on, some neighbors murmured, a little suspiciously, while others, who already didn't like her very much, rolled their eyes. That's when I raised my hand and, as calmly as I could, said, "That's funny, Karen, because I have a video that explains exactly how all this happened." Silence. She went pale on the spot. I took my cell phone out of my pocket and hurriedly connected it to the TV in the living room. As soon as the video started playing, the buzz was instantaneous. There she was, sneaking into my shed, picking up the honeycombs, looking around like an amateur criminal. And then, bam! Nature called in the debt. The laughter started low, but soon turned into widespread guffaws. Mr. Thompson almost fell off his chair from laughing so hard. Some people were filming the TV. Others simply stared at Karen, as if she had 3 heads. She tried to defend herself, mumbling something about it not being what it seemed. But who would believe her? "So you mean you broke into my property in the middle of the night, stole my honey, and now you want to sue me because the bees did their job?" I asked, crossing my arms. She opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out. For the first time since I'd met her, this woman was at a loss for words. The next day, her lawyer withdrew the case against me without even trying to negotiate. What could he do? The evidence was overwhelming, and the story was so ridiculous that any judge would laugh in her face. But I didn't stop there. I decided to go ahead with a lawsuit against her. Trespassing was not something that could be ignored, and the truth was that I wanted her to feel the weight of the consequences in her pocket. Of course, she tried to wriggle out of it. First, she pretended to be sorry. Then she tried to blame it on an error of judgment. And finally, for the icing on the cake, she tried to offer me a deal. She wouldn't sue me, and I would withdraw my complaint. My answer? See you in court. And the best was yet to come. After all this shenanigans, it was clear that I wasn't just going to let it go. This woman had spent months making my life hell, tried to screw me over with a ridiculous lawsuit, and, on top of that, had the audacity to steal my honey. Justice had to be done. And when I say justice, I mean that I wanted to see her pay. Literally. My lawyer filed a lawsuit against her for trespassing, theft, and moral damages. Not to mention that she could still be caught for false accusation in the lawsuit she herself filed against me. Basically, everything she tried to use against me turned against her. Pure irony. Her reaction? Panic. What was once an arrogant, self-righteous woman was now a person desperately trying to get out of the hole she dug herself. She tried to argue that it was a misunderstanding, that she just wanted to try some of the honey, as if she was picking up a free sample at the supermarket. Then she said she had done it because she needed natural honey for an alternative treatment. Let's face it, there is no reasonable argument to justify invading someone's property in the middle of the night and going off carrying honeycombs in a bag. The court didn't find it very funny either. On the day of the hearing, my defense was simple. I showed the video of her breaking into my property and stealing the honey. I showed the messages she sent to neighbors spreading lies about my bees. And I finished with the best argument of all. If it hadn't been for her own actions, the bees would never have attacked. And you know what's even better? The judge loved the story. In the middle of the hearing, he had to hold back his laughter. It was as if he couldn't believe that someone could be so stupid as to sue the very person they stole from. The verdict was swift and certain. A hefty fine to cover the damage to my property, lawyers' fees, and compensation for defamation. Oh, and of course, a court order banning her from going near my land. That was the icing on the cake. After the hearing, the news spread around the condominium like wildfire. And if before people had only found this woman annoying, now she was the butt of jokes. Some neighbors started calling her the Honey Queen. Others put decorative bees in their gardens just to tease her. She, of course, tried to maintain her pose. But you can tell when someone is defeated. From that day on, she avoided running into me. When we bumped into each other, she'd duck her head and pace as if I were a vengeful deity, ready to swarm her at any moment. And you know the best part? A few weeks later, she put the house up for sale. She moved out quietly, with no goodbyes, no fuss. It was as if she was running away from her own shame. And me? Well, I got on with my life. My bees continued to produce honey. The neighbors finally had peace. And, on top of that, I made a lot of money with the compensation she was forced to pay. If there's one thing this story has taught me, it's that karma always finds a way to act. And sometimes it comes in the form of a very angry swarm. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.